Did you see this? This Olympic Snowden has come forward. A former Olympic athlete has come forward to expose kind of the charade that the Olympics are, how corporate sponsorship plays a role in it, a very significant role, what that corporate sponsorship does to the athletes of the Olympics, what they can say, what they can't say, and all of this corporate money, how much of it goes to the athletes. We'll talk about that coming up in a minute. But other news in Sochi, something that we on our program have talked about for the last like 3 years now since it's been going on. I'm sure Nicole's talked about the music group Pussy Riot. Two members of the Russian protest music group Pussy Riot, who recently returned from a trip to the United States back to Russia, have been detained in Sochi, where the Olympics are happening, and they spent nearly 2 years in prison for protesting Russian leader Vladimir Putin inside an Orthodox cathedral, and now they are planning to stage a protest against Putin in Sochi. So keep your eye on the group Pussy Riot, as we've been doing now for a couple of years after the injustices done upon them, for speaking out. And again, how much do we take for granted here in America? The fact that we have still a constitutional right of freedom of speech and freedom to redress our grievances. I mean, we shouldn't take that for granted. If anything, we should be exercising our rights. I mean, doesn't that make sense? It's like you don't get your rights unless you know what they are and you practice them. Anyways.
Yeah, I like the fact that there's palm trees in Sochi. It's actually such a warm weather climate that the other day it was warmer in Sochi than it was in Florida.
That's the big Twitter trending hashtag is hashtag colder than Sochi.
Oh, really? I didn't know that. Yeah, I mean, it's like Dave Zirin exposed some of this where he said that the Sochi Olympics, first of all, the Olympics themselves are just a huge, any Olympics for that matter, including Atlanta and other ones, are just a huge example of exploitation. Exploitation of the land, of the people, and just it's such a corrupt enterprise. And one of the things he exposed was that the road from the Olympic Village up to the ski mountain cost something like $8 billion, and could have been paved in beluga caviar for the cost it was for this one little road, which just shows you how much corruption and cost overrun there is. And this Olympics itself costs more than all other Olympics combined.
Whoa.
Yeah, and so it's just,
I didn't know that.
Where's the money? Yeah, where's the money coming? Where's it going? I mean, there's just so much. I mean, well, Putin's just such a corrupt actor, and he's just giving all his money to his crony friends, and it's just such a disgrace, And it's the whole. I like the Daily Show did a whole thing on it where they showed the top 3 medal winners was like Norway and all the Scandinavian countries, and they're like, so basically your skin color has to be the same color as the surface you are playing on in order to be successful in the Olympics.
Don't be hating on the Jamaican bobsled team, man.
In the Winter Olympics, yeah.
Don't be.
It's just such a white Caucasian. Anyway.
Yeah.
I'm not a big fan of the Winter Olympics, much less any Olympics. But it's it's what's on the news these days. It's all a spectacle and bread and circus.
Well,
let's
talk about this for a minute, and let's try to expose that bread and circus a little bit, or at least talk about the people who are exposing that bread and circus a little bit. Did you see this conversation of the former U.S. Olympic luge athlete on Democracy Now? I think it was last week, a couple weeks ago, and she wrote this article talking about how the U.S. Or the Olympic opening ceremony is just like the Hunger Games opening ceremonies. And then they had this conversation about the corporate sponsorship and other issues with the Olympics. Everyone's talking about the Olympics, everyone's watching the Olympics, but no one's focusing on maybe what's going on behind the scenes and the exploitation and the corruption.
Oh, yeah, that was the Democracy Now! From last week, which was really good, by the way. I recommend people go back and watch this interview. And Dave Zirin was on there as well. And he just, it basically says, the one woman, the former female luger, anyway.
Yeah.
Yeah, she's a real loser. Sorry, I couldn't resist. It said basically that the Olympics, the Olympics themselves have been privatized. And she was like, Verizon wholly sponsored my training and all my gear, my equipment, and I was given a course on what to say and what not to say when it comes to my corporate sponsorship. And so she's like, there was no government funding for what I'm doing,
Right.
even though I'm representing the United States. It's all privatized, and I become a spokesperson for this company, and I'm not paid for it. They're just giving me the money to practice and to ice time and all those other things. And it's like I'm still living in poverty, and I'm not making any money. And this is doing something I love, and it's doing it based on the little bit of money that I get from this private industry, of which I cannot criticize or say anything negative about. And it was just, it's sort of the dark side of our Olympics that we don't hear about on the news or on any of the corporate media for that matter. While I think any really, if you look at any sport, and the NCAA is the best example of a plantation that amateur sports, quote unquote, amateur sports are just rife with exploitation because you don't have to pay the athletes. And yet there's ad revenue, there's all this kind of TV broadcasting revenue. Everyone's making money off these athletes who aren't getting paid. And they are the prime employees of this industry.
Yep.
And so I came in good conscience watching the NCAA, and I love NCAA basketball.
I was just about to say, anything college sports, right? Same thing.
Yeah, I mean, I just, I will look at it and I'm like, God, this is on, prime time on ABC or whatever. All the ads are running and all the money's being made, and these kids aren't even going to get a good education. As soon as their eligibility is up, they're out of school, and most of them don't graduate or get much of an education because they're playing ball the whole time. Yeah. On one form or another. And yet here we are watching it and rooting for it, thinking, oh, what a pure sport. These guys are playing for the love of the game.
Yeah, right.
Oh, it's just so sad.
Eric, Eric in the Radio or Not chat room mentioned Sochi is just like the Lake Tahoe area here in the United States. You can go to the beach and you can go skiing all in one day. What is wrong with that? Good point.
Oh, I didn't know there was a beach in Lake Tahoe.
I didn't know either. That's kind of like some of the, I can't give away too much, but it's kind of like my hometown here of Portland. You can drive for an hour and a half and go skiing on Mount Hood, or you can drive for 2 hours and go to the beach. It's all like right there, and it's great.
Oh, cool.
But yeah, I've got a couple of clips from that conversation of the former U.S. Olympic luge athlete exposing the Olympic charade. I want to play those for you. Is that cool?
Let's hear it, man.
All right. Like we have a choice.
I'm glad you did that.
Here is the, I really, I didn't want to talk about the Olympics, but then this story came out. I was like, oh yeah, we should talk about this story because it's apropos.
Yeah, I mean, I don't want to talk about all the BS that surrounds it. I think it's important to expose this kind of corruption and give people an alternative narrative. I mean, to what's really going on. I mean, my parents love, we got to come over. Like, why don't you come over and watch the Olympics with us? I'm like, because I don't give a shit, and it's like, and all these other exploitation reasons. It's like, you have to change the narrative, and this is one way to do it.
Yeah, here it goes. Here is this conversation from democracynow.org, how the Olympic opening ceremony is just like the Hunger Games opening ceremonies. It's a charade.
The former Olympic athlete, Samantha Retrosi, competed in the luge in the 2006 Winter Games in Italy. She recently wrote an article for The Nation titled, "Why the Olympics Are a Lot Like the Hunger Games." Samantha, why?
In the initial part of the first part of the article, I talk about the Olympics as a place of exploitation. I make the comparison of the Olympic opening ceremonies to that of the Hunger Games opening ceremonies in terms of the pageantry, the clearly divided. You have the district level divisions. I see that kind of division really as reflective of national division. I think there are a lot of parallels that can be drawn between the nature of the Olympics themselves, the cruelty and exploitation embedded within them, and the same cruelty and exploitation that we see in the movie The Hunger Games.
Now, just as a disclosure, I haven't read any of the Hunger Games books. I saw the first movie because my girlfriend read all the books. She's into it, want to go see the movie, and we've seen the movie. And if you've seen the Hunger Games movie, you know exactly what she's talking about. Or if you've read the book, you know exactly what she's talking about. This, when you watch the Olympic opening ceremony, it's this big hoorah. They got, everyone's walking around doing the march, and they got fireworks, and it's all good. And and if you see this Hunger Games movie, it's kind of the same idea, and they really draw the distinction in the differences of the classes. You know, you have the ruling class, the ruling elite, who makes all the rules and what they say goes, and then you have essentially the entire populace, which is enslaved, and they have to fight each other for their existence. Sounds familiar, doesn't it? It's I laugh because it's uncomfortable. And here is the yeah, we got time for a couple more clips. This is getting into how the corporate sponsorship plays a part, and pay attention to what it does to the athletes and how it limits them and constrains them.
Well, in the United States, corporate sponsorship is of paramount necessity. There's no government support for luge or any other Olympic sport. Essentially, the system is entirely privatized. You have the budget of the U.S. Luge Association and many other national governing bodies being entirely subsidized by corporate sponsors. When that's their only lifeline to even operate, their entire operational budget is based upon corporate sponsorship. You have a very interesting situation where that relationship of dependency, really there's a lot of vulnerability that the organization has to face, and which shapes its activity and the way it treats athletes. And athletes themselves are entirely dependent upon the corporate sponsorship as well. So essentially you become a spokesperson for a corporation as an athlete in the current context.
Oh, ouch. So you're saying that essentially, you know, the only money that these teams have are corporate sponsor money. So you are pretty much subject to the corporate sponsors, right? Fall in line or else you don't get to play.
Well, talk about your neo-feudalism. I mean, these people are serfs.
Right. But wait, there's more.
And, you know, that's one of the repercussions of privatized sporting hierarchy. The athletes a lot of them are fully subsidized by their corporate sponsor when it comes to the basic level of subsistence. So Verizon paid for my travel expenses. They paid for my anything that I needed to live. Outside of that, I had no other lifeline to any other support. There's no government support. My contract mandated that the sponsorship I could pursue individually was limited based upon that allegiance to Verizon exclusively. So really, if I wanted to have any economic flexibility, I had to go out and get a job. Right now, Verizon is no longer sponsoring USA Luge, for example. A lot of those athletes have had to take on additional work hours, and that's in addition to the full-time job of being a competitive national team athlete.
It's kind of like a college student that gets a scholarship to go to college. Some stipulations, of course, they're all different, scholarships and grants and stuff, but most of them say you can only spend this money on school stuff. You can only spend it on tuition. You can only spend it on books. You can only spend it on cost of going to school. And of course, if you take out a loan, you can spend that money on whatever you want, right? But if you get a scholarship or a grant, most of them say you can only spend this on school. Well, if you go to the Olympics and you sign the contract there, which she's going to talk about in just a second, you are subject to that corporate sponsor and that corporate sponsor's subsidies. And they say, well, you can only use this money to exist. Anything outside of your minimal existence does not count, and therefore you're going to have to fund it yourself. And that's what she's talking about here. These athletes are exploited, and it's wrong. Doesn't that bother you? It bothers me a little bit, but I don't sit there and watch the Olympics at night either. So, I mean, what do you do? What do you do?
Yeah, I mean, NBC, I think paid, some obscene amount of money for the rights to broadcast it, and then they've spent. I mean, there was this article I read a while back. The months leading up to the Olympics, they spent how much airtime advertising themselves, as being like, "Hey, tune in here for the Olympics. We are covering the Olympics, aren't we special?" Blah 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 blah. And it's just if you, I don't even watch corporate media anymore. But every now and then I go to my parents' house and they're watching it, and so like, come on, sit down and watch it. And 5 minutes of that crap, and I'm yelling at the television. It's like, and this is just a sporting event on NBC with who's the son of a bitch who's the main anchor on NBC? Not
Bob
Brian Williams.
Costas.
No, not Bob Costas. The other guy.
Matt Lauer.
Matt Lauer. God, that guy's like
Matt
nails in
Lauer,
a
I
chalk-
need a raise, so we're going to fire 40 other people? Matt Lauer?
Yeah, with the nails in the chalkboard, just him on it. Oh God. Anyway, the point is it's just it's when you shut out the poison of the corporate media and you tune all this kind of crap out for it's been a couple of years now for me to sit down even for 5 minutes of it. Like I'm yelling at the television because I'm like, that's a half truth. Oh my God, I can't believe this is such bullshit.
Yeah.
It's like, how can you profile these athletes and not talk about how they're being exploited? Oh, look at the sad story. This woman, she's worked really hard and she came in with the gold or she lost her gold because she hurt herself and blah, 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 blah. And it's just all these emotional highs and lows that they try and tug at your emotions with because obviously, as we know, emotions override rational thought. And so you're able to actually critically think about what's going on when they're feeding you these kind of emotional roller coaster moments on television that we all just sort of get sucked into. It's sort of like it's compelling, and it is actually compelling, but it's the huge lie of omission by profiling specific athletes and their stories and not actually telling us about how they're being exploited. It's like you just ignore the whole fact that they're, when this is over, they're not going to have jobs. They're going to be likely in debt, and if they're even not injured for what they're doing, because some of these sports are very dangerous. And for what? For our entertainment. I mean, what do they get out of it? They love it. It's something they do, and then afterwards, nothing. I mean, look at Tanya Harding. I mean, she was just
another Portland, Oregon's finest.
Yeah, there's a whole thing. ESPN did a 30 for 30 on her. Where they profiled that whole thing, and of course. It's just sad. I mean, she came from a broken home. Her whole personal life was just so screwed up that ice skating was her escape, and of course she was exploited for it. And then in the end, she's fat and out of shape and unemployed. It's like
and doing celebrity boxing. You remember that?
Just doing all those pathetic things. It's like it's sad versus the other people who are. I mean, obviously the Olympic Committee, the USOC or whatever it is, the Olympic Committee that organizes the Olympics and the hierarchies are fundamentally anti-democratic.
Yeah, they'll do that.
And the Olympic Organizing Committee is just the epitome of corruption. I mean, wherever they go, they exploit the landscape and the resources of that community to put on this giant spectacle. And then when they're gone, you're left with all these vacant stadiums and empty facilities. And what? For what? For 1 week or 2 weeks worth of an event? And the whole community's devastated and it's just a huge, huge waste of money.
Yep.
I mean, just think of the social uplift that could be spent by actually giving people, a safety net or even some sort of education or healthcare, et cetera, versus putting on this giant spectacle for 2 lousy weeks and a ton of money.
Bingo. There's a great conversation going on right now in the chat room at radioornot.com. Anonymous 5793 says, I don't think tax dollars should be spent to let someone go sledding. Primary sports are very well supported, though. And Griffin Darklighter says, well, when the Olympics are over, what do these people do for a living? They scratch, scrimp, and starve. So we're going to come back. I've got one more clip to play of the former luge U.S. Olympic athlete exposing what she had to say and what she didn't have to say as, well, part of the team, right? Thanks to that corporate sponsor, Verizon. The Nicole Sandler Show continues on radioornot.com after these short messages. We'll be right back. I've got one more clip I want to play from the former U.S. Olympic luge athlete. She participated in the 2006 Italy Winter Games in the luge event on the U.S. Olympic team and gave an interview on Democracy Now! Talking about her new article on The Nation, why the Olympic Games are a lot like the Hunger Games. This last clip I want to share with you was very particularly interesting to me because here you are as a U.S. Olympic athlete. You have to sign a contract. You have to be beholden to the corporate sponsor that sponsors your team. And guess what? You have to maintain their propaganda. You can't say this and you have to say this. And here's what she said about that.
Well, as a U.S. national team athlete, I signed a contract every year with the U.S. Luge Association, and that contract stipulated what I could and couldn't say, how I should use my media time. Essentially, I was being trained to be a spokesperson for Verizon.
What would you say about Verizon? They give great phone service?
No, I would say thanks, Verizon, for making all my Olympic dreams come true. The realization of my American Olympic dream is enabled by Verizon.
Thanks, Verizon. Verizon makes all my Olympic dreams come true. Hey, if it wasn't for Verizon, I wouldn't be here. Thanks, Verizon. Wow. Just an example. And now, as you go home tonight and you watch the Olympics and you watch like interviews with the athletes, watch for them dropping the corporate sponsors in there.